Alex arrived at the Harper estate early that morning, the sky painted with the soft gray of a city just waking up. The mansion itself was imposing, as if it had been built to make anyone feel small. He adjusted his tie nervously, reminded himself this was just another job, and stepped up to the door. The receptionist barely looked at him, and he was soon escorted to the elevator that would take him to Victoria Harper's office. He had heard stories about her, a woman of power, poise, and a reputation that preceded her. Everyone seemed to tiptoe around her, carefully measuring their words. Yet here he was, about to step into her world. A young man with little experience in navigating the subtle games of influence and authority. The door opened, and Victoria stood there, framed by the late morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was tall, graceful, and every bit as commanding as he had imagined. Her hair, streaked with silver, hinted at wisdom, and her eyes, piercing but gentle, studied him as if weighing whether he belonged. "You must be Alex," she said, her voice smooth but carrying a subtle strength that made him stand a little straighter. "I've been expecting you." Alex smiled nervously and nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for seeing me." Victoria gestured toward the office. "Come in. We have much to cover." From the first moments, Alex sensed something unusual about Victoria. She carried herself with authority, yes, but there was an undercurrent of warmth, a depth beneath the surface. Most people only saw her public persona, the decisive, unyielding executive. Alex felt he was glimpsing something different, something human. He reminded himself to focus on work, but he could not ignore the subtle tension in the air, a pull that made his chest tighten. Their initial meeting was all business. But even in those professional exchanges, there was a strange rhythm developing between them. Victoria explained her schedule, her expectations, and the high standards of her team, and Alex listened attentively, trying to absorb everything. He asked questions that were meant to clarify, but they seemed to strike a chord with her, drawing soft nods and even rare smiles. He couldn't help but notice the small ways she seemed to let him in a lingering glance. A slight shift in posture, a faint laugh at one of his careful jokes. The day passed quickly, a blur of appointments and emails. Yet by late afternoon, a minor scheduling crisis forced them into an impromptu meeting that lasted longer than either expected. Alex watched her work, the efficiency and elegance with which she moved from task to task. There was something mesmerizing about her, a combination of competence and subtle humanity that made it impossible to look away. Victoria noticed his attention and, for the first time that day, allowed herself a relaxed smile. "You ask good questions," she said lightly, reviewing a spreadsheet. "Most people only nod and follow instructions." Alex felt a rush of warmth. "I just want to understand, make sure I do it right." "That's refreshing," she replied. "People who try to understand are rare." That evening, Alex prepared to leave, but the conversation had changed. It was no longer strictly about tasks and schedules. Victoria shared brief stories about her early career, the challenges she faced, and the mistakes that had taught her the most. He listened, genuinely intrigued, discovering a side of her that few ever saw. She spoke of ambition and fear, of loneliness in positions of power, and of the rare moments of genuine human connection. Alex found himself opening up in small ways, sharing personal anecdotes and thoughts. There was a trust forming, fragile but undeniable, and both of them were aware of it. When it was finally time to leave, Victoria's gaze lingered. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes it's dangerous to care too much about someone's life that isn't yours." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He smiled faintly, unsure whether he should respond. Then he said, "And sometimes it's dangerous not to." The words hung in the air. They were careful, measured, but charged with emotion neither could fully articulate. Alex walked down the marble hallway, feeling a pull he could not explain. Behind him, Victoria returned to her office, staring at the door long after he had left. She recognized the stirrings of something she had long forbidden herself to feel. The beginning of emotional connection with someone outside the circle of her controlled life. Over the next few days, Alex settled into a routine. He organized schedules, prepared documents, and managed correspondence. Yet each interaction with Victoria left him unsettled in the most compelling way. He noticed the subtle cues, a softening of her tone, a smile that lingered longer than expected, a gaze that seemed to look deeper than the professional surface. He tried to keep his distance, reminding himself of the boundaries, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her office, to the moments of unexpected honesty and warmth. Victoria, meanwhile, found herself looking forward to his presence in ways that startled her. She prided herself on her discipline, her ability to manage people and projects with precision. Yet Alex's calm demeanor, attentive listening, and understated humor were quietly disarming. She had spent years building walls around her office, around her home, around her heart, but now she felt the beginnings of cracks forming. She allowed herself small moments of vulnerability, small admissions that would be dangerous if noticed by anyone else. She realized that in Alex she had found a confidant, someone who could see her human side without judgment. One afternoon, a sudden project complication forced them to work late. The office was quiet, the city lights glittering through the expansive windows. They worked in silence for a time, exchanging only the necessary words. Yet the air between them was filled with unspoken tension. Alex noticed the way Victoria's hand moved over the documents, precise and careful, and he realized he was studying her more than the work itself. She, in turn, felt the weight of his attention. And it was at once exhilarating and frightening. Eventually, Victoria looked up, breaking the silence. "You've been unusually observant," she remarked. Alex hesitated. "I try to notice details that matter." Her smile was fleeting but genuine. "That's rare. Most people don't pay attention to what really counts." They exchanged a long, quiet look. It was a moment of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the connection growing between them. Neither spoke further. There was nothing to say. The shared understanding hung between them, powerful and fragile. And both knew that crossing the invisible line would change everything. By the time Alex left that evening, rain had begun to fall outside. The soft patter on the windows mirrored the quiet tumult in his mind. He felt emotions he had not anticipated: admiration, concern, a pull of intimacy he could not name. He knew that something had begun between them, something that would test his professional boundaries, Victoria's carefully constructed rules, and the lives they both led. Victoria remained in her office, staring at the door where he had gone. She allowed herself a moment to acknowledge the stirrings of her own heart. It was a feeling she had not experienced in years. Curiosity, connection, the fragile thrill of trust with someone who was entirely outside her world. She had broken one of her own rules: never let anyone come close enough to matter. The realization was both exciting and terrifying that night. Both Alex and Victoria carried the spark with them, though neither could name it. It was a quiet, unspoken promise that their paths had irrevocably shifted. The foundation of their professional relationship had been altered by something delicate and powerful: human connection. A bond had begun, one that would grow and challenge them in ways they could not yet imagine. In the world of rules, power, and obligation, they had found something unpredictable: recognition of one another, a shared understanding, and a fragile hope that even in structured lives, hearts could find a way to speak. And with that thought, the first chapter of their story closed, a story that promised intensity, emotional complexity, and the beginnings of a connection that would change them both forever. The following week brought a rhythm to Alex's life at the Harper estate that he hadn't anticipated. Each day, he performed his duties with precision, organizing Victoria's schedule, managing her communications, and ensuring that the empire she and Richard had built ran smoothly. Yet, beneath the routine, a tension simmered, a quiet current of connection between him and Victoria that neither could fully control. It was subtle at first: a shared laugh over a minor scheduling mishap, a glance that lingered just a fraction too long, a word of encouragement that seemed to carry more weight than necessary. Victoria, always composed and deliberate, noticed the shifts in her own emotions. She had spent years maintaining a flawless public persona, keeping her personal feelings carefully in check. Her life was a blend of control, responsibility, and unwavering commitment to her family and business. Richard, her husband, was supportive but often distant, immersed in his own work and ambitions. Their marriage had always been strong, but over the years, the spark of youthful passion had mellowed into routine and comfort. It was safe, predictable, and necessary. But it lacked the intensity that Victoria now found herself yearning for. Alex's presence stirred something she had not expected. It was not just admiration or respect. It was a subtle, profound recognition of shared humanity. In his attentive listening, his careful attention to details, and the occasional glimpse of quiet humor, she saw a part of herself reflected back, a part that had been dormant, hidden beneath layers of expectation and duty. She caught herself looking forward to his arrival each morning, anticipating the moments of unguarded conversation, however brief. One late afternoon, an unexpected crisis forced Victoria and Alex to stay after hours. A key client had delayed confirmation of a critical deal. The office was filled with the soft hum of computers and the distant city noises outside. They worked side by side, documents spread across the polished desk, fingers brushing over papers as they sorted schedules and notes. There was an intimacy in the shared focus, a rhythm of teamwork that neither had planned but both appreciated. Victoria paused, leaning back in her chair, and allowed herself a deep breath. "Alex," she said softly, almost hesitant, "do you ever feel trapped by expectations, by the life everyone thinks you should lead?" Alex looked up, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. He had expected professionalism, guidance, perhaps even critique, but not this raw honesty. "I think everyone feels that at some point," he replied. "Sometimes the hardest part is knowing how to balance what's expected with what your heart wants." Her gaze lingered on him, searching as if she sought confirmation that he understood more than the words conveyed. "Exactly," she murmured. "It's like living in a cage built of gold. Everything looks perfect from the outside, but inside, sometimes you just want to breathe freely." Alex felt a pang of empathy, a resonance with her sentiment. He understood the pressures of expectations and obligations, even if his own life had not been shaped by wealth or influence. He saw in Victoria not just a powerful executive, but a woman yearning for connection, for understanding, for authenticity. His own feelings had shifted from admiration to something more profound, though he wrestled with the ethical lines that bound them. The hours passed unnoticed as they worked and talked, exploring topics that ranged from trivial details of office management to reflections on life, ambition, and dreams deferred. Alex shared snippets of his past, small moments of vulnerability, laughter, and mistakes that had shaped him. Victoria listened with a focus that was unusual for someone so accustomed to authority, responding not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity. Each story exchanged built an invisible bridge between them, fragile yet compelling. A sudden thunderstorm began outside, drumming softly against the windows. The sound was a reminder that the world beyond their office was active, chaotic, and yet in this room, time seemed suspended. Victoria closed her laptop, leaning forward with her elbows on the desk. "You make it easy to think," she said, almost a whisper. "Easy to see things differently, to feel things I've tried to ignore." Alex looked at her, sensing the weight of her words. He wanted to assure her, to offer comfort without overstepping, and so he spoke carefully. "Sometimes it's enough just to be seen," he said. "To have someone notice the part of you you usually hide." Her eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, the professional barrier between them felt thinner than ever. It was not physical. It was emotional, a quiet understanding that resonated more deeply than any words could convey. Victoria was aware of the danger in this bond, aware that feelings could grow where they had no place in the public eye. Yet, in that shared silence, she allowed herself to acknowledge the stirring of emotions she had long denied. As the rain continued, they spoke of small personal details, favorite books, childhood memories, dreams once held and now shelved. It was an exchange of souls disguised as casual conversation, and both of them recognized the subtle thrill in it. The connection was dangerous, yes, but it was also alive in a way that few experiences had ever been. It reminded Victoria that the heart could awaken, even in the most controlled and regimented of lives. When the storm finally passed, Alex prepared to leave. He gathered the documents, shutting down the laptop, and turned toward Victoria. "I should get going," he said. She looked up at him, her gaze steady. "Yes," she replied softly, "but thank you for listening, for understanding." He nodded, feeling the gravity of her words. "It's mutual," he said quietly. As he walked down the hallway, Alex felt an unfamiliar weight, not of guilt, but of anticipation. The connection they had begun to cultivate hung between them like a delicate thread, promising growth, conflict, and emotion that could not be ignored. Victoria remained in her office, staring at the empty space where he had been, feeling the pull of the bond forming. She was aware of the rules she had broken simply by letting someone in, aware that the emotional intimacy they shared could have consequences she did not yet fully comprehend. In the days that followed, the pattern became more pronounced. Alex's attentiveness, his quiet confidence, and his genuine care became a subtle anchor for Victoria amid the constant demands of her work. Every shared laugh, every thoughtful glance, every small word of encouragement added layers to their relationship. It was a bond that neither could name, yet both recognized. A silent acknowledgement of mutual understanding and human connection. Victoria began to notice small changes in herself. Her mornings felt lighter when she knew Alex would be there. Tasks that once felt tedious seemed more manageable with his presence nearby. She realized that the spark she felt was not trivial. It was a sign of emotional awakening, a reminder that even in a life dictated by rules and power, the heart had its own needs and yearnings. Alex, too, found himself changed. His professional focus was now intertwined with genuine concern for Victoria's well-being, for her happiness, and for the rare glimpses of vulnerability she allowed him to witness. He walked a careful line, conscious of boundaries, yet aware that every interaction deepened the emotional bond between them. The tension was not sexual. It was human, profoundly emotional, and deeply compelling. One evening, as the city lights twinkled below, Victoria and Alex worked late on a presentation for an upcoming client. They paused briefly, stretching and looking out the window. The conversation turned unexpectedly personal, touching on dreams deferred and choices made. "Do you ever wonder if you're living the life you were meant to live?" Victoria asked. Alex considered her question, realizing the depth behind it. "Sometimes," he admitted. "And then I realized that the life you think you should lead is often different from the one that makes you feel alive." Her eyes met his, and there was a silence loaded with meaning. Both understood that feelings were no longer abstract. They were present, undeniable, and potent. The connection they had nurtured had crossed a threshold into something transformative, a quiet rebellion against the rigidity of their respective worlds. By the end of the evening, Alex left with a soft patter of rain following him, mirroring the quiet unrest in his heart. Victoria remained in the office, staring at the city below, reflecting on the emotional awakening she had experienced. It was not scandalous, it was not destructive, yet it was powerful. It was proof that even within a life of rules, obligations, and appearances, the heart could seek connection, understanding, and warmth. As they parted ways that night, neither spoke of what had shifted between them. Words were unnecessary. The awareness of their bond, fragile yet undeniable, was enough. They both knew that the coming days would test their emotions, challenge their boundaries, and force them to confront the complexities of human connection. And so, Part 2 closed on a note of quiet tension and emotional anticipation, a recognition that rules could be bent by the heart, that connections could awaken in the unlikeliest of circumstances, and that the bond between Victoria and Alex was poised to grow into something neither of them could ignore. The following days carried an unusual tension, one that neither Victoria nor Alex could ignore. Their work continued as usual, but the moments they shared, however brief, were charged with an awareness that went beyond professional courtesy. Victoria noticed at first a flicker of anticipation whenever Alex entered the room. Kay quiet hope that he would understand her unspoken thoughts without them being said aloud. For her, this connection was both thrilling and unsettling. She had always been in control of her environment, her emotions, and her relationships. Yet Alex had found a way to touch something she had long suppressed. Alex, too, felt the weight of the evolving bond. His respect for Victoria remained intact, but it was now interwoven with a profound emotional attachment. He found himself thinking of her outside the walls of the office, recalling the sound of her laughter, the intensity of her gaze, the way she moved through her day with an effortless authority. It was a pull he had never expected, one that made him question boundaries and intentions, even as he remained committed to maintaining professionalism. One afternoon, an urgent situation forced them to work late yet again. A client had unexpectedly altered terms for a major deal, and the office was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the distant city noises. They worked closely, side by side, their shoulders brushing occasionally, their hands reaching for the same files. There was a rhythm to it, a synchrony that made the hours slip by unnoticed. The storm outside mirrored the storm within them, a mixture of tension, anticipation, and unspoken desire. Victoria paused, leaning back in her chair, spoke with an honesty that surprised even herself. "Alex, do you ever feel torn between what's right and what feels necessary for your heart?" Alex hesitated, sensing the weight of the question. "Yes," he said carefully. "I think everyone feels that at some point. The challenge is knowing how to honor your responsibilities while still being true to yourself." Her eyes softened, reflecting relief and surprise. "Exactly. It's like walking a tightrope. One misstep and everything could fall apart." Alex nodded, understanding not only her words, but the unspoken meaning behind them. They both knew that their emotional connection, however pure, carried risks. Yet in that quiet moment, it felt undeniable. A force that neither could resist nor control as the evening wore on. Victoria and Alex found themselves sharing more personal stories. She spoke of her early years in the corporate world, the sacrifices she had made, the loneliness she had endured despite her success. Alex shared his own struggles, moments of uncertainty, decisions that had shaped his path, and the quiet hopes he carried for the future. With each story, the invisible barrier between them weakened, replaced by a deep understanding and trust. It was during one of these exchanges that Victoria realized how much she valued Alex's presence. He listened without judgment, responded with empathy, and offered insight without condescension. In his attention, she found a mirror for her own vulnerabilities, a reflection of the human side she rarely allowed others to see. For Alex, Victoria's openness stirred emotions he had long kept restrained, a recognition of her strength and fragility intertwined. The night stretched on, and they finally paused, looking out the window at the city lights glittering below. Victoria's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I've spent so long following rules, keeping boundaries, protecting myself. But with you, I feel something different, something I can't quite define." Alex met her gaze, understanding without needing words. "It's human," he said. "Feeling deeply is what makes life meaningful, even if it's complicated, even if it's risky." She smiled faintly, a mix of relief and recognition. "Complicated is an understatement," she said. "But necessary, I think. To feel fully, to live fully, you have to take some risks." Their eyes lingered, and in that shared moment, the emotional connection they had been nurturing reached its peak. There was no physical intimacy, no inappropriate action, only recognition, trust, and the quiet acceptance of feelings that had long been forbidden. It was a turning point, a realization that human emotion, honesty, and connection could exist even in the most structured and rule-bound lives. Over the next few days, this understanding influenced their interactions. Every conversation, every shared glance carried an awareness of the bond between them. They navigated the delicate balance between professionalism and emotional openness with care, each interaction deepening their understanding of one another. It was not reckless. It was thoughtful, deliberate, and profoundly human. One evening, as Alex prepared to leave, Victoria stopped him at the doorway. "Alex, may I ask you something personal?" He nodded. "Of course." She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Do you believe people can truly understand one another without judgment? Without the weight of expectations?" Alex thought carefully. "I believe it's rare, but possible. When it happens, it's transformative. You recognize someone for who they really are, not who the world expects them to be." Victoria's eyes glimmered with unshed emotion. "Then I think we've found that, haven't we?" Alex's breath caught, and he nodded, understanding her completely. The acknowledgement was both exhilarating and grounding. They had created a safe space, a shared emotional reality where honesty, empathy, and recognition reigned supreme. It was not scandalous. It was life-affirming. The days that followed were filled with a subtle intimacy, a shared understanding that infused their work with a quiet warmth. Victoria found herself smiling more, her decisions sharper, her energy renewed. Alex felt the same. His focus improved, his confidence grew, and he recognized the rare privilege of being seen by someone as remarkable as Victoria. It was during a weekend when Victoria invited Alex to stay late on a critical project that a moment crystallized their emotional bond. The office was silent except for the faint hum of air conditioning and the occasional sound of rain against the windows. They reviewed the final documents, exchanged feedback, and celebrated small victories with quiet laughter. Then, as Alex prepared to leave, Victoria surprised him. "Alex," she said softly, "thank you for being here, for listening, and for understanding. I don't say it often, but your presence, it matters more than you know." He met her gaze, feeling the weight and sincerity of her words. "The feeling is mutual," he replied. There was a pause, a shared breath that carried unspoken acknowledgement of the journey they had taken together. The office was no longer just a space of work. It was a place of human connection, growth, and understanding. In that moment, both realized the true power of their bond, emotional, transformative, and enduring. As Alex walked out into the rainy night, both of them carried a profound sense of fulfillment. They had discovered that emotional intimacy could exist without scandal, that human connection could flourish in the boundaries of respect and professionalism. The bond they shared was delicate, powerful, and life-affirming, a testament to the resilience of the heart and the quiet beauty of genuine understanding. Victoria returned to her office, looking at the empty chair where Alex had been. She felt a calm she hadn't experienced in years, a quiet certainty that, despite the rules and responsibilities surrounding her life, she had found a connection that mattered deeply. It was not fleeting or superficial. It was rooted in respect, empathy, and the recognition of one another's humanity. In the final days of their shared work, the emotional thread between them remained strong, guiding their interactions, enriching their understanding, and strengthening their trust. Neither acted on impulse. Neither crossed lines of propriety. Instead, they cultivated an emotional intimacy that was rare, beautiful, and entirely safe. It was the kind of bond that could sustain itself, transforming mundane tasks into meaningful collaboration, and turning ordinary moments into experiences of emotional resonance. By the time Alex's temporary assignment ended, both he and Victoria knew that their connection would continue to influence their lives. They had discovered something profound, that emotional honesty, shared understanding, and the courage to recognize one another's humanity could change the way they experienced the world. It was not a story of scandal or recklessness, but of two people finding recognition, empathy, and warmth in a world that often demanded detachment. As Alex left the Harper estate for the final time, they exchanged a quiet farewell, a smile that spoke volumes, and a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. It was a moment of closure, not of finality, and understanding that their emotional connection had enriched both of their lives in ways that could not be undone. Victoria watched him go, a sense of peace settling over her. She had allowed herself to feel, to recognize, and to trust, and in doing so, had rediscovered a part of herself long dormant. In the end, their story was not one of temptation or moral compromise, but of emotional awakening. It was a testament to the power of human connection, the courage to feel deeply, and the quiet strength that comes from truly seeing and being seen. They had broken no laws, no boundaries of propriety, yet they had crossed the threshold into something far more meaningful, a bond built on empathy, respect, and the undeniable beauty of human understanding.